SQL injection module is going on, and in this video we will discuss about some preventions for SQL injection. And from these prevention, first of all, our network security should be tight, network is configured properly, and the firewalls will be installed so that any request coming from the outside of the network should be filtered through the firewalls. That is why our network, first of all, the network security should be tight, and then we have to review the database permissions for each logins. We have to limit the permissions for the login. Like in the previous video, we have discussed that when this user is entering the login and the user has entered some malicious code with the login name like this one. This is the login name, and again we entered by semicolon, and then there is a statement for the drop table. So these kind of the statements, the drop table, delete data, or truncate table, and such kinds of uh, the rights should not be with the users. So we have to limit these kinds of rights. We have to review the all the permissions for the logins, and then we have to limit the logins permissions. And after that, we have to validate the input entered by the users. We have to check the binary data. We have to check the escape sequence and the common characters. We have to make a set of the common characters like the semicolon, hyphen, wildcard, asterisk, xp underscore, and we have the user when will enter the data. We have to validate against our common set of the characters. If the data is entered, is user entered some these invalid characters, so we should have to immediately reject the input. So we have to validate the user input, and then we have to make some pattern checking for the variable type, length, format, and range. When the user will enter, we have to verify that the input is following the pattern which we have arranged for the input. And for the we have to validate the string, that the string data is following the pattern which we have defined for the strings or not. If it is if it is outside of the pattern, then the this input should be immediately rejected. And for the input, we have to use the parameterized store procedures. We should not have to directly concatenate the input entered into the variable with the SQL query. Instead of that, we have to use the parameterized store procedures. And in this parameterized store procedure, the login name and like login name and the password should be received into the variables of the store procedure. And then there we have to validate these variable before concatenating with the dynamic SQL. Like this is the SQL server, and we are in the query analyzer. Before we have checked that the this is the query. Before before when the this hacker attacked add the malicious code, we are using directly the queries. We are in the data in the login names and password which is entered by the users in the variables. These variables are directly concatenated with the SQL queries. We should not have to use like this. We have to create the stored procedure like this stored procedure, and in stored procedure we have to define the parameters. In these parameters we have to accept the values from the users. The user input should be through the stored procedure parameters. After that, we have to validate these parameters. Like for the escape sequences, for some these wild characters, we have to use some built-in function like replace function. If user is entering some kind of like this percentage sign with the login name, we have to replace this percentage sign with the replace function, so that it should not behave incorrectly. Like percentage sign is will if we will use with the string, it will bring all the data from the table matching with starting with the JED. So we have to use this replace function to make it a valid string, and like this replace function we have to use, or there is the function quote name available in the SQL server. This quote name function we have to use to convert the string into a valid SQL string. So these are the functions we have to use to make the values of the parameters into the valid SQL strings. So these are the some of the preventions which we have to use for the SQL injection.